on the paper, another hard case. And got a wife back in Lubbock, kids in their Sunday best. I ain't some villain in a movie, I'm a man doing my best. You could scream in my face and block my way, but this badge on my chest means somebody's safe today. You hold that sign, I hold this line in my hands. While you chanting the street, I'm the one who stands. Yeah, you draw your crowd, I draw a line in the sand. Saw you playing for cameras, shoving phones in my crew, spitting words like traitor, like you know what we go through. When you circle that transport, like it's some kind of game, there's a scared little girl in the backseat, you don't even know her name. You can scream in my face and block my way, but this badge on my chest means somebody's safe today. You hold that sign, I hold this line in my hands. While you're chanting the street, I'm the one who stands. Yeah, you draw your crowd, I draw a line in the sand. You say you care about people, then you shove them into harm's way. You turn a bus into a battlefield, I'm just trying to get them home today. Call me every name you can think of, I'll still show up when it hits the fan. When the dust clears, when fear's near, we'll see who really ran. You can scream in my face, you block my way, but this badge on my chest means somebody's safe today. You hold that sign, I hold this line in my hands. While you're chanting the street, I'm the one who stands. Yeah, you draw your crowd, I draw a line in the sand. Clock in at midnight, vest on, boots laced, another name on the paper, another hard case. And got a wife back in Lubbock, kids in their Sunday best. I ain't some villain in a movie, I'm a man doing my best. You can scream in my face and block my way, but this badge on my chest means somebody's safe today. You hold that sign, I hold this line in my hands. While you're chanting the street, I'm the one who stands. Yeah, you draw your crowd, I draw a line in the sand. Saw you playing for cameras, shoving phones in my crew, spitting words like traitor, like you know what we go through. When you circle that trend you shove them into harm's way. You turn a bus into a battlefield. I'm just trying to get them home today. Call me every name you can think of, I'll still show up when it hits the fan. When the dust clears, when fear's near, we'll see who really ran. You can scream in my face, you block my way, but this badge on my chest means somebody's safe today. You hold that sign, I hold this line in my hands. While you're chanting the street, I'm the one who stands. Yeah, you draw your crowd, I draw a line in the sand. Maps on the table, coffee gone cold, circles in red ink, stories you were told, whispers in a stairwell, names you never say, every move recorded, filed and tucked away. You talk like you're taking out shadows, like it's just checking a box, moving on. But every face you erase in your diary stays burned in the back of your thoughts. You talk like it's easy, like breathing, like the world turns right when they're gone. But you can't wash off what you're dreaming when the night drags you back to the start. Headlines on loop, heroes for a day, flags on the screen, static in the gray, glory in the briefing, spit shine, sharp smiles, then quiet in the mirror, you flinch every time. You talk like you're taking out shadows, like it's just checking a box, moving on. But every face you erase in your diary stays burned in the back of your thoughts. You talk like it's easy, like breathing, like the world turns right when they're gone. But you can't wash off what you're dreaming when the night drags you back to the start. Who writes the ending? Who gets the blame? Is it ink on paper or blood on a name? You say it's bigger than you, then stare straight ahead. But the greater good you whisper keeps counting your dead. You talk like you're taking out shadows, like it's just checking a box, moving on. But every face you erase in your diary stays burned in the back of your thoughts. You talk like it's easy, like breathing, like the world turns right when they're gone. But you can't wash off what you're dreaming when the night drags you back to the start. Crank it up, let it roll. Stars and stripes in my soul. toes on, boots in the gravel, heartland truth on every channel, open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe or we don't talk at all. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. We back the bad, we guard the border. We love our guns and law and order. They try to shame every word we say, but we don't bow down, we just press play. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the bell. Hey, we won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. You can cancel the show, but not the crowd. We're still here, still talking loud. Hand of the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rail from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
All right, good morning. Excuse me, just decided to cough right as the song was ending. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. How about it? It's a pretty good question I had on the screen before during the intro, wasn't it? Before we played the song. I'm still vibing a little bit. A little raise hell and then a little chill. I don't know. A little bit of everything, I suppose. It's all good. But you saw the image, right? While you were in the waiting room, if you will, to get on the live stream today. Let me pop it up there on the screen again there. Yeah, I saw a picture similar to this. It was a picture of Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and it was JD doing just what it shows here. It's a little bit different. It's been framed this way, but gesturing to Marco, and it just hit me as like, man, do I love that team. I don't know which one I love more, though, in terms of who should be the one. It was just late last night. It was, I don't know, 6 hours ago, really 7 hours ago. It was around midnight or so. I was kind of putting the finishing touches on everything I wanted to talk about today and everything I wanted to share with you and whatnot. And it just said, what if 2028 was tomorrow? What would MAGA do? What would true conservative Republican America do? They got what they wanted in 2024. We got what we wanted with President Trump and Vice President Vance. I think at the time, nobody had really thought a whole heck of a lot about Marco Rubio. He was a great senator, no doubt about it. And, of course, he was a presidential candidate when he became Little Marco to Trump's, in the primaries at that time to Trump. And nobody really paid a ton of attention to him since then. But then suddenly, over the last year plus now, now that we're into March, so we're about 13 and a half months or whatever into the administration. since Marco Rubio became Secretary of State. And he's just killing it in every measurable way that one can kill in a political sense. And I'm just seriously wondering, I don't know my own answer. But I just thought to myself, if it came down to these two guys, now they may end up as a team, like I said. A lot of people are thinking JD and Marco Rubio are the, it's the great dream team of of the next generation, younger guys picking up the mantle for Trump and taking it into another level. And maybe it would be that, I don't know. But before it came to that, there would both, I just have no doubt they would both want to actually run in a primary, in a series of primaries. And I'm curious, what would MAGA America do with these two guys? I don't know. There's so much to like about Marco, and there's so much to like about JD Vance. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about this now. Fortunately, it isn't 2028 tomorrow. We got to get through the midterms, for crying out loud. But this was just a hypothetical. That's why I titled today's episode Hypothetical Tuesday. Which MAGA man would you pick? I don't know the answer. I just think it's a very, very cool thing to kick around. So we'll talk about it a little bit on the chat today. At least I hope you will talk about it with me on the chat today. Good morning to everybody as I look in the chat. I've got another way to show your comments on the screen now, by the way, which is just kind of cool. It's a little bit bigger and a little bolder now so you can see it. And yeah, look at that. All right. See, we're learning. We're getting better and getting more things, able to add more things to the conversation. Each and every show. So yeah, when you make comments in the chat room, and I love my chatters during the live stream. By the way, don't feel bad if you're not in the live stream, obviously. But if you're just, that's the thing. I kind of actually put it in the comments or in the description today. If you're doing the live stream, I want to hear from you in the chat. And if you're not doing the live stream, which the overwhelming majority don't, you only get a couple hundred people in here during the live stream at this hour, but later on throughout the day, as people get an opportunity, is when you get a lot more people watching. So if you're watching outside of the live stream, do it in the comments section and answer the question. I very much want to know what MAGA thinks, or at least people in this audience think. So there you go. RH Ron says, my sister and I were just talking about this. Would we rather have JD or Marco? Well, there you go. That's the question. Now, what's the answer? That's what I'm interested in at this point. But let's say good morning to our group that is up and at it early. I'm going to stop coughing. I got to stop coughing sooner or later. Up and at it during the live stream here and see what's happening. So good morning to everybody who is in B Morgan and CAD, and that's Christine, if I'm not mistaken on that. All right, I need help on this. I need serious help. Holy cow, this is driving me nuts. All right. I'm going to there's a comment that is showing up on my StreamYard version of the chat, okay, that's on. And it is showing me an auto-generated comment that was made on Facebook. We're live streaming on 3 channels right now. We're live streaming on the Rumble channel, which is the hub, which is where I tell you to go first. We're live streaming on YouTube as well, even though only a handful of people know it. And we're live streaming on the Facebook page, which a lot of people should know, truthfully, because there's 34,000 followers on the Facebook page. So on the Facebook page, the chat is open there as well. And there is something funky. I need my tech experts, honestly, to tell me what's going on with this, okay? I'm going to show you something on the screen right now. All right, you ready? Watch this. It shows me saying this. The spawn of Satan that shot Charlie Kirk is representative of the entire violent leftist movement in this country. Violence is all they know. When they can't beat you, they kill you. This may have been the shot that starts the new civil war. All right, you see that? I wrote that back in September, shortly after Charlie Kirk was killed. Okay? I have never posted it since. I don't disagree with it, but I haven't. But it is set to auto post somehow, somewhere on every post I make, almost every post I make on on Facebook. It's and I'm not doing it. I haven't shared that thought or reposted it or whatever since September when I originally posted it. And now it shows up as a comment on everything I post. I've looked on Facebook settings. I've looked on auto comment and looking for there's something called auto comment. I don't think it exists actually, but I don't know where it comes from. But look at that. It's very long and it's precise and it's being posted on things that have nothing to do with Charlie Kirk. It's just showing up and I don't know why it is. So if you're a Facebook expert or a tech guru or whatever you want to call it, let me know, honest to God, what's going on with that. Because it makes me look so bad. It makes me look stupid, like I'm posting about Charlie Kirk on a post about, I don't know, Iran or whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. It's just showing up everywhere. And I've never said it to do that. It's just a weird, funky thing, I guess, with Facebook. But I would love to know if anybody has an answer on that. Good morning to Macromia and Joanne and hockey player Mike and KC John and Roz and Lisa and Rosebud and Robin B. Morgan, DD Bag of Donuts is up and at it. Who else do I see? Sally. Good morning, Sally. May God bless our troops indeed. How come nobody's saying that out loud anymore? I'm going to hit that in a moment. Don't let me forget to hit that in a moment, chatters. She said, God bless our troops. And I want to talk about patriotism in a second. Number one, Rhino, Dutchy Mom, Charlie G, Red Frog, West Sider, Yo Jimbo, cranking it up, letting it roll. Absolutely. DB Jones, SRL, Keister, sorry. Lindy. All right, keep it up. Keep them coming. CMG, Donna. All right, good stuff. Good stuff going on. And people are answering the question already. But I'll come back to the question about JD and Marco in a second. Okay, Lindy says it looks like someone is copy pasting on auto. I don't know. I don't understand how somebody has access to my account to copy paste on auto. I don't even know if that's a thing. I don't understand. I don't understand how somebody could copy a comment or a post of mine and then pasting it on auto in various places without my knowledge. I don't know, because I'm not doing it. I don't even know how to do it. It's really weird. I don't know. I'm going to talk about patriotism for a second. I'll come back to the Rubio and JD question in a moment. I actually got a text message from a friend who I asked if he wanted to come on the show. By the way, I do have somebody coming on the show in less than an hour. At 8 o'clock, we're going to hear from John R. Lott Jr., who's doing some tremendous research. But somebody texted me, and in fact, I'll read it to you. I won't ascribe his name to it because when he texted it to me, I guess this would have been Sunday night. Yeah, it was Sunday night. He texted this to me, and I said, "You care to come on and talk about it tomorrow because I'm wide open?" And he said, "No, it's just a friend to a friend," which I said, "Done, respected." But he sent me a picture of a flag hanging off a pole on the side of a house. And he said, for the first time in 25 years, our flag is the only flag flying on our very long street. This has never happened before. I don't know what it means. I also drove around the city and saw very few flags flying. Very strange, as this is a very patriotic community at all times, no matter what is happening politically. I saw that post, and like I said, or that text message, and I invited him to come on. And like I said, he said, "No, it's just something I was just wondering privately between friends." So now I'm going to take it public without identifying his name because I agree with the disturbing nature, I guess, of that development. I don't know why it would be the way that it is. No clue, in fact. Are fewer people hanging out flags now? That's a general question. One that, by the way, I observed when I was biking in the fall of 24, I was, it was election time, and it was, I don't know, it was in September, I guess, or whatever. And I was just on my bike, and I was just because I crank around as many good communities as I can nearby, so that I can get some good miles in. And I go to different places, and it was very, very clear to me the number of houses that had flags on them that were Republican houses, meaning they were people who you could identify by their flag because they also had other things. And some of them are neighborhoods or people that I knew as well. And I was driving around doing commentary with my phone as I was pedaling around and pointing out. I said, you can see where the Republicans live and you can see where the Democrats live. The Democrats never fly flags. And that's obviously not true to a man, meaning every single one of them, but overwhelmingly so, because they're not proud really of the country. They're demonized again and again, like Barack Obama wanted to fundamentally transform it. You remember that phrasing. So it was very clear. There was a huge, massive show of flags, and they were, like I said, they were either known to me to be Republican people who lived in those homes, or they had other signage out that showed, they would have a Trump yard sign and a flag. They would have a MAGA sign and a flag. And it was just very clear. It didn't take a genius to figure out where the Republicans lived, and any of the other ones that did not. So that was something I took note of. And now my friend here is taking note of this in his neighborhood right now, just generally speaking, either Republican or Democrat, quote unquote, Democrat or Republican homes, just people aren't showing the flag very much and wondering why. And I will say I haven't had mine out for a while, and I'm kind of bad about it because typically when the weather is awful, I want to bring the flag in because I don't want to see it get ruined, in the snowstorms and in the sleet and ice and crap like that. But we've had the nice weather now the last few days, and I should absolutely put it back out, and I have not. So that's just a forgetful thing, I think, from that vantage point. For me, anyway. Maybe somebody else has a different opinion. We can talk about this, but specifically to right now, I'm wondering about this because of where we are, meaning to the extent that we are, we're at war, right? We're in a war. We're not in a declared war, obviously, because we talked about what that means. We've talked about, excuse me again, it's froggy this morning. We've talked about what it means, to get a declaration of war and so forth. So we're not in a war in that regard, but our troops, we've had 7 casualties, and the campaign is not over. It is apparently moving to a more rapid end than a lot of people realize. Maybe even President Trump realized, because they've been so effective in taking out all of the different elements of Iran's capabilities to do terrible things to people, including destroying a lot of their funding apparatus. So it's not going to last very much longer. But in this country, when the Iraq War happened and when Afghanistan happened, and I'm sure prior to that, it just depends on the size and the scale, I suppose. When we have troops fighting, we put flags out. We put flags out and we show our support for the effort and for those heroes who are out there doing what they do. And maybe it's because there are no boots on the ground. Maybe if we found out that our neighbor or somebody from the local, graduate of the local high school or people in your community know, they're being deployed to Iran the way they were to Iraq or to Afghanistan or wherever. Maybe then it would bring it out, but just a very interesting, observation made by my friend about the lack of flags being outside on houses. He said it's a very patriotic neighborhood where he lives. Quite frankly, where I live, I don't know. I'd say it's probably underwhelming. I would say that. In other words, at its peak in the summertime, I'd say, a few. I'd say, if I had to guess, 20% maybe of the houses would put out flags at its peak. But like I said, I expect more when there are things that are involving the safety of our troops. And seven have lost their lives in this Iranian war effort, or this Iranian strike effort so far, and I haven't noticed a lot of talk about it, or flags, or political statements about it, if you will, by people by that kind of display. I want to play a clip here if I can, real quick. Where is President Trump? My eyes are going so bad. I really need to. I don't know if I need to get my prescription changed or not, but that's getting a little bit harder to see. I want to share this with you, though, President Trump, just to the point that I was just making about the war ending, maybe, or the strike, the campaign in Iran ending faster than people thought it might. Here's what he had to say.
Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think so.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to
soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels of leadership are gone. Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very, very powerful, very effective.
So soon, he said, which is good, because there were some people who were thinking and were, speculating on television, that it could be a campaign that was going to extend into maybe even September, up near the midterm elections, and it's going to be many, many months. And now President Trump is saying soon, which, I think the messaging needs to get a little bit more, in tune, because Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, every time he's asked about this, he won't say a word. We're not going to tell you whether it's going to be 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 6 months, because we don't advertise what we're doing to the press, because that's advertising it to the enemy. But President Trump is here saying, yeah, it's going to be over very, very soon. So I don't like the message discipline of the way things are going in that regard. I would like for them to all be on the same page with what they're going to say and what they're not going to say. And sometimes I think it's just because President Trump goes off, off the cuff whenever he's having these press conferences, and he says things that have not been cleared or agreed upon or discussed or whatever with some of the other leadership, such as the Secretary of State, such as Vice President Vance, who was at the dignified transfer yesterday of one of the fallen, and of Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. But President Trump has also asked whether or not, since we took out the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, are we going to take out his boy now too?
Do you have to take him out? Does he have a target on his back?
You mean the new supreme leader? You mean the son?
How can there be an Iran with
Well,
another
I don't want to say that, but I was disappointed because we think it's going to lead to just more of the same problem for the country. So I was disappointed to see their choice.
So again, President Trump, laying a few things out that maybe I don't think other people would have. I don't know if the Secretary of War would have talked about. We're not going to talk about our plans for their leadership and so forth. President Trump is, I'll tell you what, call him what you want to call him, but you must call him an open book. He is willing to lay it all out for everybody. And Britt Hume on Fox News is among those talking about President Trump's mood being particularly upbeat during this campaign.
I think his confidence is based obviously on what he's hearing from the commanders over there, that the mission is ahead of schedule, that they did far more in the first few days to wipe out Iran's retaliatory capacity than they expected they might be able to, and that there's not a lot left over there to menace us.
One other note that I want to hear from President Trump in the press conference yesterday, I want to share with you. This one is, this is one where, especially because it ties to what I asked at the open, and I titled this episode about JD Vance and Marco Rubio. And then you add to that the message discipline thing that I was just talking about, how we don't always hear the same exact thing from Trump that we do from Rubio, that we do from Vance, that we do from Hegseth. That we do from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, speaking for the president. We don't always get the same messaging. And I think that's a little bit, I don't know, I want to call it problematic, but it's not ideal. I would like to think that everybody is all marching to the beat of the same drum, if you will. Well, there was a question at the press conference yesterday about the president, again, who's an open book, full transparency, about Vice President Vance and about whether or not he and the vice president agree on the war effort, the strikes, whatever we want to call this, non-war war in Iran. And apparently there have been some disagreements, although the president tried to smooth that over a little bit. Watch.
I don't think so. No, we get along very well on this. He was, I would say, philosophically a little bit different than me. I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic. But I felt it was something we had to do. I didn't feel we had a choice. If we didn't do it, they would have done it to us. I felt, based on the negotiations that were being had by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco and Pete and everybody was involved, I felt that they were looking to tap us along before they hit, and I thought they were going to hit. And if they hit us first, that would have been a very bad thing.
So, yeah, and that part is true. But what really interested me there, and I'm curious to see what you think about this, particularly as it pertains to my question this morning that I threw up there about Marco Rubio and JD Vance. And it literally doesn't mean anything right now because it's not 2028, as interesting as that would be if it was. But it just from a hypothetical standpoint, would you prefer JD Vance or Marco Rubio, two phenomenally popular now MAGA leaders in the administration? But you just heard President Trump say that there was a little bit of a philosophical difference between him and JD Vance. He said, I don't think he was as enthusiastic about it, about going to, start the strikes on Iran, to disable them, to cripple them, to force a regime change. They took out the Ayatollah Khamenei. They took out most of the 40 some members of his leadership team, and eventually now they whoever is left decided that the Ayatollah Khamenei's son should be the new supreme leader. But he said JD Vance was not as enthusiastic about that whole campaign, but he was still quite enthusiastic, just not as much as me. But it signals even this much of a rift or much of a disagreement, or if you're a 10 out of 10 going for this, I'm maybe a 7 out of 10. I'm still for it, but just not as much. I don't know. But I would like to think that everybody in our command staff of the United States military and its overall government, talking about the commander in chief, the second in command, Vice President Vance, and then you get to the chief diplomat in Marco and the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. I would like to think that they are all like this, that everybody is on board with all of these types of extraordinary decisions, particularly those that are going to put so much in jeopardy. And like we talk about the old phrase, blood and treasure. The blood of 7 Americans has been spilled over this. And that's part of war, whether it's a declared war or not. And everybody knows that. And every person who puts on a uniform and sews a patch on their shoulder knows that this can happen, or they can be deployed and let's go. And, or they may be struck in a base. And as a retaliation for an effort in which others, went and flew a mission, or whatever the case might be. So, don't get me wrong. We know, and they know, our troops, what their sacrifice may call for, what kind of sacrifice that their job or their role may call for. And their families understand that too. And their sacrifice is here to, in the effort of not only freedom, but specifically for protection of American interests at home and abroad. A weakened, a conquered, a different face of Iran is a good thing. It's worthy and it's noble. It's something that for 47 years presidents have been promising to do, is deal with the world's leading sponsor of terrorism against they've killed Americans. They've killed American allies, not just Israelis either. We're talking about, a despotic regime, rooted in fundamental Sharia law. And I don't question the mission. I don't. I question whether the timing is necessarily the best, because it's a midterm and war divides people. We need to be united. But I don't question the mission or the need for it. I'm going to trust the president and those who said, let's do this. We have to do this. Okay. But one thing that I want to hear is I want to hear that everybody in my government, particularly in the executive branch and among the command leadership, that they're all on the same page. That's what I want. There's a scene in a movie. I do this too much. There's a scene in a movie. Oh, doggone it. Oh, you know what it is? It's Crimson Tide. It's Crimson Tide, one of my favorite Denzel movies, one of my favorite Gene Hackman movies of all time. Absolutely love it. Miss Gene Hackman, by the way. Thank God we still get to enjoy Denzel, one of the greatest living actors of all time. Anyway, but there's a scene in the movie Crimson Tide where, and if you don't know the premise of the story, it's a nuclear submarine, one of the U.S. Nuclear submarines, and Gene Hackman is the captain, and Denzel Washington plays his XO, his executive officer, number 2 in command. And when a command is given and an order is given on the ship to the entire crew, on the submarine, the captain makes the command, and then the executive officer repeats the command, showing that, yes, leadership is unified in this. This is what must be done. And there was a scene in which, and the whole thing is about, whether or not a nuclear strike should be launched. Nuclear weapons should be launched from the sub because of some cut-off communications and the Russian rebel situation. Again, I don't want to get into the details of it too much, but the point is, Denzel disagreed with launching at that particular point, and he wouldn't repeat the captain's order, which is part of the protocol. And I remember the scene in which Gene Hackman dressed him down and said to him, I don't mind if you have doubts or questions or whatever, but you save them for private. You don't do it if privacy, I remember the line, if privacy doesn't permit itself, then you bite your damn tongue. You don't question me or what I'm ordering or whatever in front of crew. And then the reason why, he said, is these are just a bunch of young boys out there that are trained and being asked to do something horrific, which would be launch a nuclear weapon. But the only way they will know that what they're doing is the right thing, as horrible as it may seem, is that they have a belief in the unified chain of command. And that means they hear your voice right after my voice. That lets them know that leadership is unified on this. And you're doing the right thing. The two highest ranking members of that crew are saying, let's do this. And so that it makes everybody else say, all right, we believe in it. I don't know, I should probably get in the chat and see if anybody's talking about that. Because like I said, it was a phenomenal movie. And if people saw it, they know what I'm talking about here. But you do understand the point that I'm making, right? The unified chain of command matters. Everybody in agreement at the highest level matters. And what I'm hearing from some of these comments from the president in the press conference is maybe that there's not all unity, at least in terms of maybe not the decision to go and strike, but there may not be unity in what the defined parameters are. Remember I talked about that checklist. These are the objectives, and Secretary of War Hegseth has been very clear about this too. These are all things that he wants to make sure get done, or they want to make sure get done before they call the campaign off. And now we deal with, in whatever capacity that is, the new Iranian leadership. But checking every box, everybody should have that same list, is my point. And I don't know that they do, because Pete Hegseth will not commit to a certain period of time before that would be done. But President Trump is saying, yeah, very soon, maybe a couple of weeks. Okay. I would like unanimity among president, vice president, secretary of war, and the chief diplomat, the man who's supposed to, make all of this, sell all of this to the rest of the world. And our other allies, of course, being Secretary of State Rubio. So that's just a thing. When I hear President Trump say, yeah, JD Vance wasn't as enthusiastic about doing this, but he was still enthusiastic. I don't know if I want to hear that, really. There's some parts of that I think we could leave out. Just my personal opinion on that one. I'm curious to see what folks are saying. Now, back to the other question. This is what happens. I chase a squirrel up a tree. That's what ADD does to you. So the image that I had thrown up there earlier on, if you just turn it on, this is what I had made up for the promo for today's show. If tomorrow was 2028, if tomorrow was 2028, which of those guys would have your backing? I'm curious to see what people say about this. So I'm going to get back into the chat now and see what people have been saying about this, because there were a lot of earlier questions here before I get into the Iran situation. So let me see here. All right. The algorithms are outing you as MAGA. Okay, here's Sally. Sally says Vance first, but would be okay if Rubio. DD Bag of Donuts says I'm from Ohio. So JD. You know, and I'm not going to diss that in any way. But I am going to say, I suppose, out loud, I hope it's not just about, bragging rights that the next president came from Ohio. I hope it's not about that. I hope your reasons are deeper than just Ohio. And DD, if you want to give me a little bit more on that, please do. I'd like to get more thoughts on that. Because I want it to be because he's the best person for the job, I guess is the point I'm trying to make here. Let's see. Good morning. My coworker says, what is this? My coworker says he isn't going to vote Trump because Trump and the Republicans are not American first. How do I even argue that? Well, SRL, that's a really good question. That's a really good question, and I'll try to answer it. And I know what he's saying. This coworker that he's talking about is because this is that split. We talked about this like the day after the first Monday, which would have been last Monday, because the bombing campaign started on Saturday. So Monday we were in here and we were talking about this, and we talked about the divide, not necessarily full on divide, but the discussion of whether or not this is the right thing to do amongst MAGA, which, true Trump supporters. And that there was a lane for people saying, absolutely go forward, President Trump, yeehaw, let's hit it. And there was a lane where people are saying, whoa. We need to talk about this. Why are we doing this right now? This is not necessary right now. There's a belief that America first means we're only going to deal with what's inside our borders. This is something that everybody can define America first however they wish. But to a lot of people in that lane, America first means if they're not attacking us in our homeland, then we don't need to be using military force anywhere. We need to defend and protect America and only America, or at the bare minimum, here's the phrase, America first, right? That's just, and there are conservatives in the MAGA ecosystem that disagree with this campaign because they say it's not America first, that it's going out there and helping Israel and doing Israel first. I'm not among them. I don't believe that. I believe that the United States and Israel carrying out a joint operation like this against an enemy that has killed people time and time again, American citizens, Israeli citizens, launched attack after attack on its Gulf state neighbors, for crying out loud. Which puts our energy in jeopardy as well. It all has an impact on what we call big picture American interests. Defending American interests is America first. So to your friend or your coworker, whatever, who says, I don't know what I respond that. America first is more than just within the continental United States. Okay? America first can mean a lot of things, and that means American interests and American allies. Let's put it to you this way. If Iran was successful in wiping out Israel, as they have proclaimed is their goal, to wipe Israel off the map and declare what's left after the nuclear fallout, to declare what's left, Palestine. If that ever happened, the United States would be a much, much weaker country. Israel is a very, very important strategic ally of ours in that region, the only democratic ally we have. It matters. It matters a lot that they're there. So doing something with them and in conjunction with them to stop the despotic Sharia law-driven, Islamic regime from carrying out more terrorism against us and our interests, doing something to stop that is certainly America first. It doesn't have to mean just within our borders. All right. That's, I think, what your coworker is talking about there. DB Jones says, I'll have to go with JD. He's ready for that role now. Rubio is close and would be excellent VP for JD. I think our Ohio bias is getting the best of us here. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be JD, but so far it's unanimous. I think that's a little bit biased because I don't know anybody who has shown that they're more ready for this job in the last year, in the last 13, 14 months than Marco Rubio. At home, abroad, at that Munich where he gave that legendary speech in Munich just 2-3 weeks ago, where people are rediscovering old clips of Marco Rubio from 2015 talking about Iran and predicting everything that's happening right now. I mean, he is all over it, and he's such an effective communicator. I'm telling you, I'm kind of where most everybody else is, and I've been thinking JD takes the baton from here. But all I'm saying is Marco Rubio has made this now not an easy question to answer. And I certainly don't think it should be unanimous because he has just, exhibited leadership skills and communication skills and decision making. And he's heading up, he's the national security advisor, for crying out loud, essentially leading the National Security Council while also being Secretary of State. He's wearing so many hats, and he's just an expert at all of them, and he can't be rattled. And I love that about him. So I'm just saying he's made this a horse race. Lisa says, I watched the dignified transfer of the 7th service member last night. JD was there. Yes, he was. He was, it's obviously either the president or the vice president is there for all of those terrible, tragic times and, the acceptance of the fallen. And and Vice President Vance is perfect, in that role. He's perfect in a lot of roles. That's the other thing here. CMG, I take my flag down for the winter. I do too. That's what I mentioned before, but it's like nice out now. And so it's really nice out now and they should be out again. And myself included. I kind of forgot to do it too. Even though it's only it's a pseudo spring. It's fake spring. They're lying because in a few days it's going to snow again, but it was really beautiful again yesterday. I've got a lot more people talking about the flags. Charlie, the British flag has been determined to be a symbol of hate. Hopefully it's not happening here. I don't think that's going to happen here at all. Certainly not among true patriots. But like I said, I think it is a weird thing that it's just not as many as there once was, particularly when there's a war effort going on of some sort. Jimbo says, at this point, I threw a yo in front of Jimbo, and it's at this point, patriotism means pro-Trump. This is TDS. Yeah, very, very, there's a lot to that. Are Democrats waiting for a handout to buy a flag? Maybe so. My flag isn't up in the winter. Also, we got new vinyl siding in the fall. I don't want to make holes in it. Got to get a flagpole. All right, fair enough. That's good. Everybody's got, situations, circumstances, whatever that might impact why these things are not out. Casey John says, I don't care. Mine flies 24/7, 365, even in the weather, even in the winter weather. All right. And I'm glad. Like I said, I protect mine in that weather. I put it away. But like I said, there's no wrong answer here. Sally, again, I think many are disgusted with Congress dragging their feet and with shutdowns. Okay, if you're disgusted by Congress, fine, but don't be disgusted by the United States because the United States isn't Congress. The United States is us. We are the United States. Those are just our representatives. The people are actually what make up the country. I want to get a few more of these things and back to the question at hand here. I'm going to skip past a few of the flag polls or flag stories here real quick on the chat. Okay, here we go. That movie scene describes the sedition that those demon rats advocated for in calling for troops not to follow, quote, illegal orders. Jimbo is exactly right. Rivaling the chain of command based on your personal judgment. That is exactly what that was like. That is exactly what that was like. And I'm glad somebody else remembered that movie as well. Let's see. Patriot Mom says Rubio. There's the first one, so it's not unanimous anymore. Rubio at this moment. Again, this is March of 26. A lot of things are going to happen between now and then, but just the way things are right now. Marco or JD. Right now, JD is winning overwhelmingly, but that was the first Marco vote. Roz is throwing a wild card in here. Roz says, add in DeSantis. I love Ron DeSantis. I love him as an executive. I love him as a decision maker. I love him as a communicator. He's the best governor in this country by far. And I think the best governor in this country that we've seen in probably a couple of decades or more. I absolutely would put him in that mix when there is a new primary to be held. But I'm focusing on just those in the Trump administration right now. And these two guys are the biggest high profile guys, talking about JD and Marco. So let me kick a little bit more in here. Very hard. NCN likes that idea too, throwing in Ron DeSantis. Very hard decision to make out of those three, in my mind. Me too. I could see myself voting for every single one of them. At a different day, I might have a different opinion, but I would be perfectly comfortable and happy casting a vote for any one of those three. Hey, Bob, I feel feeling is that Jamie and Marco, I think it means say JD, and Marco both be great presidents. So my Ohio endorsement is really just a tiebreaker. There you go. I get it, DD. Okay, DD is saying, like I said, I think there is a little bit of Ohio-centric, going on here. People are proud of the idea of the next president being a Buckeye, and that's okay too. Roz again, I'll take any of the three. Peter and I were discussing this Friday night at the ice party. What does Casey John say? Love them both, and I think they'll be a good team. But since I originally was a Marco delegate, I think I prefer Rubio Vance. And there's that teamwork again: Vance Rubio or Rubio Vance. I can see that absolutely. I can see both of them, truthfully. Rubio has so much more experience. Vance is extremely bright, but he's also a schmoozer, says CMG Christine. One more, maybe a couple more here real quick. I think we need to keep, B-Butt says, I think we need to keep Rubio Secretary of State because he is doing a fantastic job. Yeah, he really, really is. I think, though, the reward for that job if he did it for the next 3 years, the reward for that job is he wants the top job. But I do see your point. Rubio, I think he'll be more appealing to the whole country. Okay, now it's starting to level out here. Now it's more people are coming around to the Rubio side. Uncle Odie says, luckily, we don't have to make that choice. As Rubio said, he will cede to Vance. He says that now. When it comes time to make that decision to enter a primary or not, don't hold him to that. I'm telling you. He has said, by the way, in case you know, Rubio has said, at least on one occasion, that if Vice President Vance wants to run in the primary, he would step aside and not challenge him. That's what he has said. He may say that now, but I don't know if that will be his feeling, in 2027 when it comes time to make that decision in the summer of 2027. I don't know. Either one would be great, and if JD decided to bow out, then Rubio would be great. Okay, good enough. What is the politically incorrect mechanic saying? Now these jagoffs, including some people that I guess used to be on I don't know what you're saying here, buddy. Some people that I guess used to be on our side are trying to spin TDS as being extremely pro-Trump as well. Oh, okay. I know what he's trying to say. He just did it very, very poorly. He's probably trying to type into his phone with greasy fingers because he's working on cars right now. The politically incorrect mechanic is. I know what he's talking about. There was a post on Facebook in which somebody who's allegedly MAGA declared that, hey, if you believe in TDS, people who are reflexively, triggered by Donald Trump's voice or sound or ideas or whatever, and, they're always going to oppose him. That's Trump derangement syndrome, no matter what it is. If he cures cancer, they're going to say, hey, we like cancer, leave it alone. They're saying that if that is TDS, there is a different TDS, which is you can never criticize him. You are so sworn and loyal to him and such a believer in him that he can't do anything wrong, that anything he says, that, if just the opposite happened, instead of curing cancer and saving lives, if he was out there taking lives, people would defend it anyway. That's what that argument was. And yeah, there are some people who feel that way. I'll be honest with you. I've said this many times. I'm not among them. I'm probably an 85% Trump guy, meaning 15% of the time, he'll say something or make a decision or make a statement or what have you that I disagree with. But I've said 85%. If I get 85% with my president or my congressman or my governor or whatever, I'll take that, because you can't expect to be 100% in line with anybody. What I've said, and I've said this in speeches to different groups too, if you can find one person that you agree with 100% of the time, every single point, lockstep, then you are looking in a mirror, because that's it. The only person you'll agree with 100% of the time is yourself, not even your wife or your husband. It's just because people are different. And so if I can find a president with whom, he's a stranger to me, that I agree with 85 to 90% of the time, I'm in. Let's go. And that's why I'm such a massive supporter. The 15% of the time I'll call out and I'll say I disagree with. But overwhelmingly, I am going to be a supporter. Speaking of being supporters, I want to say thank you right now. And I want to remind you that AFP has stepped up in a big way, and they continue to step up in a big way for Ohioans. All right. For too long, Ohio has settled for being the middle of the Midwest, and it doesn't have to be. The Buckeye Blueprint is about building a bolder, better Buckeye state, one that leads the nation in economic freedom, gives parents real education options, delivers affordable and reliable energy, and finally makes government work for the people again. AFP is Americans for Prosperity, and their Buckeye Blueprint is Ohio's future. It's not about politics, it's about policy. And if you believe our state should be number one in the nation rather than being average, you can get involved right now. Go to buckeyeblueprint.com, buckeyeblueprint.com. It's a very, very important organization, AFP is. And they also happen to be, as I said, supporting this effort, supporting the strictly speaking, Unfiltered platform that we are using to reach many, many people. And they stepped up as a foundational partner, and I appreciate them so very much. And please go to buckeyeblueprint.com, because what they're doing is also great work. It's really, really important. One other reminder for people, speaking of support for this program and for this effort and for community members and fellow neighbors who need help with Medicare. If you're on Medicare and ever find yourself confused by your coverage, you're not alone. Medicare can be complicated, and the wrong information or no information at all can cost you time, money, and peace of mind. Hey, it's Bob France. For a Medicare professional I know and trust, Mark King. I've known Mark for years, and I've confidently referred Medicare recipients to him time and time again because he puts people first and explains Medicare in plain English. Mark takes the time to help you understand how Medicare works, what coverage you have, and what options might be available based on your needs. There's no pressure, no confusion, and no rushed decisions. Just honest guidance from someone who's been doing this for nearly 40 years and who knows this system inside and out. If you're unsure about your doctors, your prescriptions, or your overall coverage, Mark is the go-to guy you need. Call 440-832-8936 to get an appointment. That's 440-832-8936. And for user-friendly information, visit keepingmedicaresimple.com. I trust Mark King for answers, and you can too. All right. Thank you to Mark. And like I said yesterday, Mark played such a huge role in our ICE party. I was so very happy to have him there. He not only sponsored the ICE appreciation party from Friday night, but he was there as an active volunteer as well, working in a variety of ways. Mark King is a true patriot, and that's what it's all about. I'm going to get a few more off of the chat before we go to John R. Lott Jr. And by the way, the conversation we're going to have with John R. Lott here in about 3 minutes or so is one that's a little bit outside the norms of what the news cycle is talking about right now. The news cycle is not about at this particular moment in time, it's not about the trans issue, but there are some trans issues that need to be discussed because mass shootings that continue to happen are largely involving trans people. I mean, bottom line, it's involving trans people. They're just shooting people at a really, really extraordinary rate, and it's something that that John R. Lott Jr. is studying. So we're going to talk about that and about a few other things here in just a couple of minutes. But I want to get back to the chat room here if I can real quick and see what else people have going on here. Politically incorrect mechanic is at it again, typing with greasy fingers again, I am sure. He says either one would have my vote, talking about JD or Marco. Way to sit in the middle of the fence. That's how you get splinters in your ass. I'm asking you to make a pick here. Far West Sider says 85% is better than 0% with Biden. Amen to that. Terry Wag says JD needs to denounce Tucker. President Trump finally has. It's weird, the hold that Tucker seems to have on some people when he has completely left the conservative movement and just has gone into a really weird place. Rubio can't be the VP. He has more power as Secretary of State, says B. Butts. That's interesting and not incorrect. NCN says, if it's right now, I'd have to be with Rubio. And that's kind of what the point is. That's the reason I threw it up there. If tomorrow was 2028 in the election or the primary election here in Ohio, for example, which of those two would have your vote? Obviously, a lot of things can change between now and then. That's huge. Uncle Odie, agree with you 100% about DeSantis, says Rosebud. A couple more here. See if I can find them real quick. How can you be 100% with someone, anyone, even wife is not 100% for crying out loud? Exactly right. That's the point I was making. That is exactly the point I'm making. Trump just assigned JD to be the, what does this say? Trump just assigned JD to be the fraud czar. Let's see what he discovers and fixes. Oh, Charlie, that's a great point. That's a great point. You're right. Talking about the fraud, talking about the tens of billions of dollars that have been. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once here. Talking about the tens of billions of dollars in fraud from the Somalis in not only Minnesota, but obviously massive amounts of fraud, much, much more actually than Minnesota. It's Minnesota got all of the pub because of Nick Shirley and what he did, but massive fraud in California, so much more so than anywhere else, to be honest. Sorry, and again, I'm trying to get ready for John R. Lott Jr. at the same time. But yeah, 1,000%. JD Vance being assigned to be the fraud czar to go in and investigate. It's kind of what's weird about it, though, isn't that what Doge was supposed to do? Doge was the fraud. Elon was the fraud czar. Find it and then expose it, and then we'll end it. Well, Elon did a really good job of finding it till his time ran out, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was exposed, but a lot of it hasn't been fixed yet. So I don't know what the vice president can do that the Doge leader of Doge, couldn't do. But it has to happen. And yeah, that's a very good point. If he is able to, Charlie, if he's able to make some things happen and claw back some of our billions of dollars in tax money and balance our budget and get rid of the deficit and so forth, that could really go a long way toward boosting him. That's a very good point. Let's see, what else do we have here? How did Casey manage to get on his show? Oh, Terry Wags, you're talking about the Casey Putsch, the candidate for governor. How did he get on Tucker's show? What was he on more recently? Because he was on before Casey Putsch even ran for governor. He was on Tucker. He was up in Tucker's cabin in Maine months and months and months ago. It had nothing to do with politics as much as the politics of energy, because Casey Putsch was designing, he's a car guy and that's his bailiwick. He's got, tens or hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube for his mechanic work, his, designing of cars and designing of engines. And Tucker got wind of his design of an engine, like a hydrocarbon engine or something that can drive from, New York to Los Angeles on one tank. Because that's how efficient the engine would be. And of course, that's why, Big Auto would never allow that to happen, because, and Big Oil would never allow that to happen, because, it would change the game of automotive innovation and obviously energy in this country. But he was on for that months ago. If he was on since then about Ohio and the governor's race, I'd be really surprised by that, but I would like to know. Okay. Oh, he was on there bashing Vivek. Politically incorrect mechanic said. He was on there bashing Vivek. All right. I didn't see that then. I did not see that. So that is newer. So he was on with Tucker Carlson on his show talking about the engines and that whole thing, but also got on to talk about his run for governor. And you remember what he did on my show when Casey Putsch was here. He offered zero about what to do about the state of Ohio. All he did was bash Vivek the entire time, which was very, very frustrating, to be honest with you, because I wanted to get some real answers out of him about what he would do. But I didn't get any of those things. So that's just the reality of it, I suppose. All right. As mentioned, I want to get to John R. Lott Jr. John R. Lott Jr. and I had a very important chat just about, I don't know, less than 12 hours ago. That's for sure. Let me do my math here. Actually, about 12 hours ago is when I sat down to talk to John Lott. So I want to give this to you now because I think John has a lot to offer.
All right, as promised, now I want to bring in one of my favorite people to talk to, just because, well, he's one of the smartest people that I talk to. And you know what they say, if you hire people who are smarter than you are, you prove to be smarter than they are. Well, you book guests who are smarter than you are, they make you a hell of a lot smarter, that I can tell you. John R. Lott is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, serves as senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of Justice Programs and the Office of Legal Policy in the U.S. Department of Justice during 2020 and 2021. He's testified countless times before Congress. And like I said, he's one of our go-to guys when it comes to all things, particularly with respect to the Second Amendment. But he is just a researcher extraordinaire. And let's welcome now John R. Lott Jr. back to Strictly Speaking. Whoops, that's the wrong one. This is the right one. John Lott, welcome back, my friend. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Bob. It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I quickly flashed up your article there, so I'm also going to flash it back up now because what we're going to talk about. John, you're talking about the transgender violence, and you know nobody wants to talk about transgender violence. Why are you talking about transgender violence? I was paying really close attention, John, to the Supreme Court hearings over a week ago, in which it was very apparent that California is in trouble. California is in trouble for hiding from parents their children's proclivities toward transgenderism, or quite frankly, they're following where they're being led in the schools, right. Which is what the bottom line here is. And parents don't have a right to know if their kids are changing their names while in school, changing their pronouns, changing clothes, looking like the opposite sex, but parents don't get to know that. Well, the Supreme Court pretty much said, yes, they do. So, right. Which is a huge, huge momentum shift in this attempt to, reverse course from this weird trans craze that we have found ourselves in for the last several years, maybe the last decade or so, that it's really gone extreme. So, John, this is a very timely article when you talk about the number of these confused kids / adults in the transgender world who end up being very, very violent.
Right. Yeah, no, the Supreme Court came out with an initial decision this last week where they were saying California passed a law saying that school districts weren't supposed to go and inform parents, despite whatever the school district policy was, about whether their child was transitioning or not. They by a 6-3 decision with the 3 Democrat liberals saying California's law was okay. The 6 Republican nominees or appointees were saying, no, you have parental rights on these things to know what's happening to your child on these things. They, at least initially, struck down California's law that's there. Now, it has to go back to lower courts. It'll eventually maybe come back up to the Supreme Court, but at least that's very encouraging. And obviously just dealing with the trans issue has been kind of a third rail. A lot of people have been afraid. In fact, I was just on a conference call earlier today where, it's hard to find academics or researchers who are willing to go and work on the issue, even though they privately know that it's, a real mess, just because they don't want to deal with the backlash that could follow from that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. But you know what? There needs to be backlash against the, those who would deny some of the statistics, some of the research that you've done here, or those who would even worse than deny, would manipulate statistics to try to sell the lie that transgender individuals, who by their very nature are mentally, what's the word? I don't want to say mentally ill, but I guess psychologically impaired is a way to say this, because either they are actually gender dysphoric, which is a term and a condition that has been diagnosed, or they have been indoctrinated, temporarily brainwashed, if you will, with the idea that they're not what they actually are. Point being, when your mind has been in some way compromised, it can manifest itself in a lot of ways, including violence. And that's what this is all about. That's what these statistics that you have put together actually show. So why don't you take us through this?
Right. I mean, there's been a lot of media analysis on whether or not transgender individuals are more violent or not than other people in the population. You have every place from the New York Times, the Associated Press, fact checkers like PolitiFact and Snopes, who have done God knows how many different analyses of these things. And if you go and you try to use one of these AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, they'll just regurgitate the stuff that's there from those different media outlets. And it's really, I don't know how else to phrase it other than just statistical malpractice. So, one of the simplest points is just when you look at whether a group is engaged disproportionately in a certain action, you have to account for that group's share of the population. So if you find, let's say, 10% of active shooters in the United States are transgender, you want to go and see, well, what percentage of the population are transgenders? If it's 7.3% of, less than 1% or 1%, 10% is a lot compared to their share of the population. And I think if you look at it conservatively in 2024, the active shooting attacks that occurred there, first of all, active shooting attacks are attacks that occur in public using the FBI definition, not part of some other type of crime like a gang fight over drug turf or a robbery, anything from one person being shot at and missed all the way up to a mass public shooting. And what you find is that transgender individuals are at least overrepresented by a factor of 12 compared to their share of the population. If you look at mass public shootings, which is kind of a subset of active shootings, it's guns fired in public, not part of some other type of crime, but more narrower than active shootings, because you're just looking at mass basically means 4 or more people murdered. What you find is that over the time period from 2018 through 2025, they're overrepresented by about sixfold, a little bit over sixfold compared to their share of the population. So, those are statistically significant numbers that are there. On our website, we kind of go through the statistical stuff that's there. And, it's at least something that people want to look at. One of the problems, and you and I have talked about this before, is that the media, when you're talking about active shootings or mass public shootings, I think has done a very poor job of talking about those. You and I have talked about how these mass murders explicitly explain that they go after gun-free zones. They may be crazy in some sense, but they're not stupid. Their goal is to get media coverage. And they know the more people they kill, the more media coverage that they're going to be able to go and get. And they know if they go to a place where their victims aren't going to be able to go and defend themselves, they're going to be able to go and kill more people. And you see the same arguments with regard to the trans, whether it be the Nashville school shooter who was trans, or the Minneapolis school shooter last fall who's also trans. They explicitly explain that they picked gun-free zones, but the media absolutely refuses to go and mention why these individuals pick the targets that they do. And you and I have talked about, can we figure out any benign explanation for why that's not newsworthy? I can. But if you look at a lot of these trans killers, the media, you just had this attack in Rhode Island, and the media in that case refused. The New York Times, the Associated Press, CNN, ABC, NBC, all refused to even mention that the murderer there was trans.
I don't recall, John, this is, you want to hear something really sad?
Yeah, sure.
I don't recall the Rhode Island story. This is how bad it's gotten. There are so many of these events. Sometimes they're almost just kind of glancing by the news, you know, the news notifications. It's not grabbing you the way it used to. Oh my gosh, a terrible mass shooting, because there are too many of them, and there are too many disturbed people out there committing them. So I don't recall the Rhode Island shooting. Can you recount that for us?
Well, it occurred almost the exact same time that we had this mass public shooting in Canada, which was also by a trans individual. The media was a little bit better on covering that, but even the Associated Press refused to identify the attacker there as trans. Obviously, the Associated Press is carried around the world on these stories, so it has an impact on these things. But you know, just last month in February, we had the Canada attack, and we had this attack in Rhode Island at an ice skating rink. There was, I guess, a hockey game that was going on there, and the father had gone and killed both his ex-wife and his son, who was there, and shot some other people. A third person died also, or was murdered also. So, you know, anyway, that's just the example.
Yeah, that was the case. I had forgotten Rhode Island. I guess that's why I didn't, but I remember the hockey shooting. So John, you know, it's one thing to call out the media, as you are correctly doing, for, you know, what you're calling, you know, statistical malpractice. But let's also talk about how they and how whomever the other organizations that are studying these things, like you are, how they refer to mass shootings. What makes up a mass shooting? Because you correctly point out in your article, which everybody should read on, it's available on the Federalist and it's on your webpage and so forth at crimeresearch.org. You know, let's talk a little bit more about gang shootings. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these things that are not what we traditionally or typically have come to know as intentional mass slaughter events.
Right. So there are two main areas of problems with regard to the analysis that people are doing. One, as I mentioned, is they don't account for trans share of the population. That's very basic. The other thing they do is that they're including a lot of cases that really don't belong in comparisons there. Look, gang fights over drug turf are bad. People need to go and look at those. But it's pretty clear that everybody from the media to the FBI and others differentiate a gang fight over drug turf as being very different than a mass public shooting where somebody is going around with the sole aim of just trying to kill as many innocent people as possible and to get media attention. That's not what's motivating mass public shooters that are there. I mean gang fights. So, you know, and what you find is they'll go and use data from the Gun Violence Archive, which is a gun control group, which defines mass shooting as 3 or more people injured. And about 85% of their cases are instances involving gang fights over drug turf. Most of the rest are robberies where multiple people are shot. And the thing is, you know, these transgender ones, anybody who reads the diaries and manifestos for these people know that they're not like gang, you know, fights over drug turf. They're very similar to the traditional mass public shootings where they are suicidal. They want to get media attention. As I mentioned before, if you read their diaries and manifestos, they explicitly talk about things like gun-free zones. The Minneapolis school shooter last fall not only explains that he picked the school because it was a gun-free zone. Minneapolis has a 5-year prison term for people who carry a gun onto school property. Not all states have that by any means. But on top of that, he not only picked the target, but the time of day. He didn't want to do it in the morning or in the afternoon when parents were dropping off or picking up their kids at school, because he was worried that one of the parents might have a permanent concealed handgun and might use it to go and stop him. And so he wanted to, so, you know, you'll have the media going and saying things like, well, he was talking about other mass school shooters or other mass murderers, and that's true, he was. But the reason why he was talking about them was that this transgender murderer was learning from these other individuals how he could go and create the most carnage, how he could go and kill the most people because he wanted to get media attention. And so, you know, I look at these transgender individuals. There's a lot of evidence that indicates that they go and commit suicide at very high rates. And so it's not too shocking to me that given how when you look through these mass public shooters, they're overwhelmingly suicidal individuals. It's not shocking to me that these transgender ones are disproportionately represented in both mass public shootings and active shooting attacks.
Yeah, 12 times you were talking about before. In fact, that was the first statistic you gave. 12 times more likely given than their percentage of the population to commit a mass shooting like this. And again,
active shooting case in 2024
cases. Yeah. That's an astounding number. Like you said, I mean, if somebody said to me that trans shooters or trans individuals are twice as likely as the general population to commit a terrible act like this, I would say, oh my gosh, if you told me 3 times. But when you say 12-fold, I mean, people need to really understand that. It's not 12% more. It's 12 times. It's 12 times 100. You know what I mean? So it's astronomical that if you have a trans individual, it is far, far more likely that that individual is going to commit a crime, a terrible active shooter crime like this than a person in the general part of the population. And why wouldn't the media want the people of this country to know that? A curious media used to report on those kinds of things because it's extraordinarily relevant to the well-being of the society that the fourth estate is supposed to serve.
Right. Well, you would think the media would point out things like these guys explicitly targeting gun-free zones and things like that. You know, if we're going to stop these attacks, if we're going to deal with them, then we need to understand these things. And my guess is that the entire debate about mass public shooting would be very different if some of these, targeting of gun-free zones, if the media would report on that once in a while, but they won't.
Yeah, well, and I guess we kind of have to ask ourselves, can we rely on the media, today's media, the way we used to? And I'm not saying it was ever perfect. It wasn't. And I'm not saying it was never political or agenda-driven, because I think it has been for a very, very long time. But not to this level, to the point where they would ignore obvious basic statistics that can be gathered from FBI data like you do, and crunch all of these things together, whether it be about gun-free zones or whether it be about the psychological profile of the shooters in terms of trans versus not and so forth. I feel like the media is being very intentional and deliberate in not saying these things. It's not that they can't find them out. They have an agenda that is maybe a little bit more aggressive than they have had in the past.
Well, look, I mean, I've dealt with the media for decades now, and it's interesting to me to see how it's changed. So 20 years ago, places like the New York Times and Washington Post would at least go through kind of the motions to go and talk to people on both sides of the issue. You go and read news stories in the New York Times or Washington Post, excuse me, the vast majority of news stories only have people on one side of the issue that they interview. I've talked to people who are in what do you call it, media schools. They are taught now not to go and deal with people on both sides of the issues. Now, could you always bias things, even though you would go and interview people on both sides of the issues? Sure. If you go talk to somebody for a half hour and they make 5 strong arguments and 1 really weak argument, and you want them to look bad, you pick the weak argument as the one you have the quote from. So, there's lots of ways that they could still manipulate, but at least they felt some desire to at least appear balanced. I don't think they care about that anymore, unfortunately.
No, and it's to our detriment as a society. I mean, honestly, because and maybe In fact, there's no maybe about it. I think the media that you have been at war with for a long time, and you know, that might not be fair to say, they've been at war with you. You have not picked fights with them other than to point out things like you do in this article that they're not doing anymore. But they've had it in for you for a very, very long time. And this media, like I said, is agenda driven like none other. And I think it's very, very clear and obvious why. Tell me, you know, how you're treated by the media, John.
Well, you know, part of the change is, you know, 15 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I would be on CNN or NBC, which is now MS Now. I would get interviewed by the New York Times or the Washington Post or places like that. Now you just don't get interviewed at all by
What
those
changed?
places.
What changed though? Why were
I
you?
think it's basically that they don't feel the need to go and have people on both sides. I mean, maybe it's been 7 or 8 years since the last time I was on MSNBC. I think Chuck Todd had me on. But you know, it's been well over a decade since I was on CNN, I think the last time. You know, I didn't mind, you know, I'd be on with Piers Morgan and it'd be like 3-1 or something like that. You know, that's fine. I just, so long as I was able to get something out there, some facts that people wouldn't have heard of otherwise. But they don't do that anymore. You know, they have a certain agenda that they want to get, and they make sure that they have the person who's going to go and say what they want them to say. You know
what's interesting, John, to me, if I may, you said that the reason they stopped having you on is because they stopped having a commitment to putting people on from both sides. I know they would disagree with this, but I've never really seen you as a guy with a side. You're on the side of what the statistics show, what the research shows. It's why your website is crimeresearch.org. You know, it's why your organization is the Crime Prevention Research Center. You're interested in preventing crime. That means studying crime and taking it wherever the data takes you. If the data took you to a place where maybe your particular political ideology wouldn't look bad, would you suppress it or would you put it out there?
Look, my views have changed a lot on a lot of different issues over time. I'm sure it'd be easy for people to document the changes that have occurred. But, you know, the point is it doesn't fit in with the narrative that the media wants to go and push. They have a certain, or at least part of the media wants to go and push. You know, I'll get calls or whatever from somebody like a Greg Gutfeld every once in a while when he wants to find out something. But you know, Jake Tapper is not going to talk to me anymore. I mean, I used to have his cell number, but he blocked me. I used to be able to text back and forth. I mean, we had at least some type of conversation back and forth. You know, there was one time maybe a decade ago, Chuck Todd and I were able to text back and forth. You know, I would go and point out what I think is an inaccuracy in their stories, and they would block me afterwards. So, but, you know, it's just, you know, I worry that there's a large group of people in the United States who are just not exposed to a variety of arguments. And I think that has a big effect on the political debate that we have.
I do too, John, and I think it's critical, not just what they're doing to you, because I'm a fan of your work, but just what they're doing to the people, because they're denying giving the people the full story. And like you said, I still don't think it's quite both sidesism, because I don't think you're on the side. Like I said, I think if you were to try to do a full what do you call a battery of research? It's probably not the right terminology, but if you were to conduct a full analytical research study on trans shooters, and you found that they are indeed exactly what the media portrays them, a very minuscule, not even counting their percentage of the population, which you did in this study. If you'd have found that, yeah, there are not very many of them, even for their small amount of the population, you would have said so, right? You wouldn't have You would have said so. You would have, because you're about the stats and you're about making people aware of what's going on crime-wise, in reality, not just with an agenda-driven slant to your research.
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. I mean, I like to think so. I mean, it's just, people in the media or, Wikipedia or whatever will go and classify me as a, Second Amendment advocate. I don't view myself that way. I just view myself as somebody who goes and looks at the data. In fact, I don't make Second Amendment type arguments. I don't make those types of arguments. To me, the bottom line is what makes people safer, what saves lives. And, the only way we know about that and figuring it out is by looking at the data on these things.
Right. And you know what? I don't want to get off into this, but you would be, in my opinion, it would be fine if you were a Second Amendment advocate doing this. That doesn't mean you're not a principled researcher, because being
Right. Well,
but
they like to label me like that just because then I don't come across. I can go and say he's not a researcher. All I can tell you is that's not what got me involved in this. It's not the reason why I stay involved in the debate. The reason why I got involved, the reason why I stay involved is I want to figure out what saves lives. And so, anyway.
No, and I respect the hell out of that. I do. It's just, if I call myself a First Amendment advocate, and I did a bunch of research to see, which type of people, for whatever the demographic I'm looking at, and maybe it's an age demographic or race demographic or profession demographic or whatever it is, or political, ideological demographic, to see who gets canceled more, who gets shut down more, and think, it doesn't mean I'm a biased person, because I believe in the First Amendment to the Constitution.
Well, hopefully people will look at the data that you're presenting and not necessarily who's presenting it. The data should be able to stand or fall on its own.
Exactly.
I agree.
That's the point I'm making. So, to me, any person can be a Second Amendment. All that means is I'm a constitutional advocate. I believe in what the Constitution says, and I study things in that regard. And what they turn up, and so that's important. So, John, going back to the trans thing, I mentioned it earlier on. The Supreme Court the Supreme Court, not in California, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in a California case, not a final decision, but a California case that said that kids who are in school pretending to be something they're not, either at the direction of teachers or counselors or on their own, or maybe under peer pressure from other kids, which is, I think, a big part of this. They're going to school and they're changing their name. They're going to school and they're changing their pronouns. They're going to school and they're changing their clothes in the coat closets and come out another way, and then going home. And then, we've talked about this before. It's a big step what the Supreme Court decided here. Do you think that, well, first of all, that you already discussed, who the individuals were on this, but what is the next step in the, dare I call it, the public detransitioning of this age or this phase that we are in right now?
I don't know. I mean, they're probably political people that probably have a better, their finger better on the pulse of what's happening. I mean, I know with regard to the court cases, right now there's a court case that the Supreme Court is deciding, hasn't come out with its decision, dealing with transgender athletes in sports, whether states like Tennessee can ban them from being able to do that. The next step would be whether or not, even in the states that allow it, do women have certain protections there? So that may be a more difficult case for women's rights peoples to go and win that one. We'll have to see, but that'll maybe be a year or two down the road. You have, I don't think they're going to get federal legislation through that's going to kind of ban medical procedures on kids. I mean, obviously Trump has done a lot with regard to cutting back funding for those. But, you have this Democratic Senate candidate, Rizzo, I guess, or whatever, who just won the Democratic Senate race primary there. I mean, the guy is constantly bringing up and pushing the trans issue. So if they're going to do it in Texas, if you ask me where the politics are on it, there's at least seems like there's a lot of Democrats, even in what you would regard as relatively conservative states, that must think that this is kind of a winning issue for them. So
Yeah,
I guess
well,
we'll just have
you
to
know,
see.
it was one of the biggest issues, I believe, in 2024, and it didn't work out so
Right.
well for them. And that's kind of the reason for my question. I feel like that a corner has been turned here with a few different, and what President Trump said too in the State of the Union address, John, when he said, you know, look, parents cannot have their kids ripped them from their arms by the state because they refuse to
Right.
quote unquote affirm what a young preformative minded kid wants to be. Right? You know, if they refuse to give them puberty blockers and then hormones and so on and so forth, and to prepare them for surgery, the state can't keep taking these kids away. There is a fundamental, and again, this is a safety issue, John. You know, in my view, it's a crime. It's a criminal issue for the state to
Yeah,
take.
I mean, the strange thing is you have a 12 or 13-year-old or 14-year-old who's making a decision that's going to affect the rest of their lives. You know, are they able to go and make that irreversible decision to essentially sterilize them so they're not going to be able to go and have kids? I mean, it's one thing for an adult to make those types of decisions. It seems like it's another bridge that's a lot farther for some kid. I mean, you go and you tell them, you know, you're never going to have relationships with another adult, intimate relations. You're never going to be able to have kids. Does a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old really appreciate what they're losing by going through and being sterilized like that? At least I'm skeptical that they would know that.
Well, no, they can't. I mean, there's a reason why every state in the country, you know, it says you cannot enter into a legally binding contract until you're at the very
Right.
least.
Or get a tattoo or whatever.
Get a tattoo, exactly. You can't even consent to having sex if you're 16.
Right.
You know, in most states. So the idea that they can do this and sterilize themselves and so forth is crazy. But that's that's one direction. And I wanted to ask you about that Supreme Court case again, John, for the purpose of bringing up another Supreme Court case. You and I talked about this before we started recording. Give me your thoughts on the case that was heard last week, in which the government apparently is really, really trying hard to limit the use of recreational marijuana or in any capacity, and even tying that to gun rights. Give me what you know.
Right. So we have 40 states where it's legal for Americans to be able to go and use marijuana, plus the District of Columbia, plus some territories. And but federal law has classified marijuana as a class 1 type substance. Trump has signed an executive order where he wants to get it removed down to a class 3, which isn't as restrictive. But the thing is, if you're using one of these class drugs that are there, classified drugs, you're banned from being able to go and own a gun. And so the issue is if somebody, and this was brought up very explicitly, you know, if you have somebody who's taking a gummy for sleep every once in a while, are they a regular user of marijuana and therefore banned from being able to go and have guns for self-defense? The problem with the case was, often the saying is bad cases make bad law. You have a pretty bad guy here who had marijuana at home and also had a gun. He wasn't charged with other crimes. He could have been, but the government, I think, and you see this once in a while, in order to kind of make a case or set up an ideal test case, just charged him with having marijuana and a gun for violating the federal law that bans people who are regular users of marijuana from being able to go and have a gun. You know, when you buy a gun, you fill out the 4473, you basically say that you're not addicted to any of these classified drugs, not using them. The problem is, for the government, since the Bruin decision made clear, though it was probably true before that, after Heller, the government, in order to make its case, has to go and show that there's a historical tradition that's similar to the type of law that they want to go and defend right now. And what types of laws were in effect in 1791 or possibly in 1868. So 1791, when the Second Amendment was adopted, or 1868, when the Bill of Rights was applied to the states by the 14th Amendment. Now, the problem is they go and look at something called surety laws or peace bonds, These are laws where if somebody was habitually an habitual drunkard, you could have to put up a bond if you're going to be able to go and keep possession of a gun. There's actually only one state, Virginia, that had this type of law and used it to restrict people's access to weapons. So it's not really clear how much of a historical tradition that is. But the government wanted to go and argue that people who use marijuana, maybe a couple times a week or whatever, were the equivalent of habitual drunkards. And you had a number of people, a number of justices like Gorsuch was saying, look, John Adams had, a bottle of hard cider with him every morning for breakfast. You had James Madison, who had a pint of whiskey apparently every day. You had Thomas Jefferson, who said he didn't drink that much because he only had 3 or 4 glasses of wine at dinner. And so Gorsuch's question was, were any of the founding fathers, should they have been banned from having guns for protection? And, obviously his answer was no. He went through and said that at the time, it was considered common for somebody to drink maybe 8 glasses of whiskey in a day. And then in order to be classified as a habitual drunkard, you had to have at least 16 glasses of whiskey a day. Wow. They drank a lot more than we drink now on these things. I'm sure at 4 glasses of whiskey, I would be tipsy, let alone the other. But the point was that somebody would drink so much that they weren't in control of their actions. And that's the reason why they would have these types of bonds that they would force somebody to have to post. So
that's called weapons under disability, isn't it, John? That isn't that the statute? There's this legal statute that says you cannot have a weapon under a disability, which means while drunk. It doesn't mean because you drink you shouldn't be able to have it, but you cannot wield one while you are drunk, while you're inebriated.
Yeah, no, I mean there's lots of state laws. Yeah. You have a concealed carry permit, but you better not be carrying concealed when you're drunk. Okay, and a lot of them will have the same rules for what's considered drunk driving in terms of your blood alcohol level for carrying concealed. So, just because somebody had a drink on Sunday or got drunk on Sunday doesn't mean on Wednesday they're not able to go and carry a gun for protection.
Right.
And so that's basically the question that the Supreme Court is going to have to answer. And at least the way I heard the justices' comments, Alito and Roberts seemed by far the most sympathetic to the government's argument. Thomas was a little hard to read, but my guess is he, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett are going to say that, look, there's no real historical precedent like this, and strike down the government restriction. The interesting question is going to be with regard to the 3 liberal Democrats that are there. And the question for them is going to be, they don't want to ban people who have marijuana from having guns, but they also hate guns. So the question is, what do they hate more? Are they going to go and say that, we hate the Second Amendment so much that we don't think it should apply here, or we need a different interpretation than Bruin for it, which I'm sure Justice Jackson is going to go and argue that she's going to want to go back to some balancing test. And maybe she'll say under a balancing test where, they look at the public policy benefits and costs that people should be able to own a gun even if they have marijuana. So you may get a lot of different, split decisions on this. So it'll be interesting to see what it turns out. My own gut is that it's more than likely that the government restriction will be struck down. Exactly the reasoning for it, though, is something we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I'll lay my bias out here on the table. I don't like marijuana, and I don't like smelling
I
it.
don't use it.
and I don't like the 40 states that have decided to make it legal for recreation, and DC and the territories, like you correctly pointed out.
Right.
So my bias is on the table. I'm going to say this. So, but here's the one caveat that I'd like you to consider and explain to me through your lens here. You're correctly saying if I have a drink or 10 on Sunday, I can't have my gun with me on Monday. What are you talking about? Both of those things are legal. I cannot have them together if I'm going to be like we talked about. But I know and I can tell when my drunk has worn off, and so can the law if need be. But with marijuana, as you know, the THC stays in your system for up to 30 days. And so,
but it's just like different levels. Look,
yeah,
I mean, it can give you
levels and different strengths and so forth. It can stay. So, in other words, my point though being, it's just like with driving. It's one of the reasons I'm opposed to the recreational marijuana thing, largely is because of driving and the statistics. You do research on these kinds of things too about the number of car accidents in states that have legalized recreational marijuana, because people can drive while high, and if they get arrested or busted, they can say, no, the reason I have it in my system is because I smoked 3 days ago, 5 days ago.
right. But it's more than that. I mean, they can give them a sobriety test. They can go and have them see if they can walk in a straight line and touch their nose and do other things that are there. You know, you bring up a point. It's not as easy to go and test with that as there is, but the question is, does it impair somebody's ability to drive properly? Does it impair somebody's ability to go and function with the gun?
Right.
And maybe there needs to be more work or thought about exactly how you're going to measure it. But there's a number of people who, when they're driving recklessly, when they're high on marijuana, they get arrested and they get charged for driving under the influence that's there. And they're given sobriety tests. Now, they can't have a breathalyzer, I guess.
Right.
But there are other ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And you don't always have a breathalyzer when you're dealing with somebody who's drunk. I mean, they can go and...
Because they refuse it. But when they do refuse it, though, they lose their license immediately.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the breathalyzer is like the...
Definitive.
Exactly. Because how well somebody did on the nose and everything else can
I agree.
be judgmental. So it's a real difficult thing to consider. But I just have a real problem with that aspect of it. But now here's the flip side to it, John, if I may, just before we're done here.
Sure.
We look at something like, if we choose to use marijuana as the substance where you should be able to have a gun for the reason I just described, then we look at other conditions that people might have based on something else that they've taken that is a perfectly legal thing, like Red Bull. Somebody takes 3 or 4 of those Red Bulls, and they're overly caffeinated to the point where they're jittery. Should that person have a gun?
Sure.
Up and, you know what I mean? So we got to be very, very careful whose Second Amendment rights we infringe upon because of a substance that they take, whether it be legal or not. That's a real...
I mean, as of 2020, I think there was like 3.5 million Americans that had medical exemptions for taking marijuana. Maybe they had cancer treatment and nausea that was associated with it, or Parkinson or other types of issues that apparently, I mean, I'm no medical expert, but apparently the claim is it helps with those things. Or somebody just needs some help sleeping, so they take a gummy once in a while. It's not obvious to me that those individuals should be prevented from being able to go and protect themselves, just because they go and do that. And the thing with the law, as it currently is, it doesn't even distinguish between those types of things. If somebody takes a gummy a couple times a week or whatever, they are banned under the current rules from being able to go and have a gun to protect themselves and their families. And that seems kind of extreme to me on that. But look, if Congress wants to revisit it, my guess is they'll have a hard time imposing new restrictions on this. But at least that's an option. That it sounds like some of the justices, like Sotomayor and others, were interested in letting the government do it. So We'll have to see.
Well, there's a couple of words in the Second Amendment that really are being tested here, and exactly what does it mean to have your rights abridged? That is a legitimate question, and regardless of who you are and what you're doing. I want to throw this up here, John, before we go. Remind people, if you want to read John's amazing work, there it is. It's crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. That's the home base for the Crime Prevention Research Center. As you can see, as we scroll down here, the transgender shooter story, or not story, but study that John just published in the Federalist is right there on his webpage. As you can see next to that, updated detailed information on mass public shootings from 98 to 2025. You can see John's social media over there on the side as well. A lot more research. There's some of the places that John's work is published in: Real Clear Politics, Federalist, and on down the line. So, and then of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to follow John, because you can get up to date on all of the stuff and the research that he's turning up by following him on X at John R. Lott Jr. I'm John R. Lott Jr. John, you are on Facebook too, right?
Yeah, I am.
Anywhere else? Anywhere else we should talk about?
I guess Instagram, we have stuff. I don't deal with that a lot, but yeah, we have Instagram and Facebook and X are the main ones.
And you've got to cross-pollinate all of these things to really.
Yeah, I know. I need to do more of it.
No, you're doing an amazing job already. You get a great following on X, and you got a great, obviously, great following in spaces like this, because we want to know the truth, not just what the AP. I love this, by the way. I said earlier on, you got a war with the media. In your second paragraph of this piece on transgender shooters, you call out AP, CNN, ABC News, NBC News, MS Now, and the New York Times all at one time, because none of them ever dared to mention that the Rhode Island shooter was transgender. And you wonder why the media's got a problem with you, because you're calling them out for their horrific media malpractice and not telling the full story because it doesn't fit their agenda. So,
well, they should be embarrassed.
They should be. They absolutely should be. And, John,
well, I'm glad you're out there. At least you kind of balance it off. So,
to the extent that I can, and I know there are a lot of the guys like me doing the same thing here, and it's with good reason, because work like yours deserves to be pushed, promoted, and shared. John, thanks as always for the info, and we'll catch up with you again down the line.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
You got it. Thank you, John. That's John R. Lott Jr., Crime Prevention Research Center, online at crimeresearch.org.
All right. And we're back. How about it? Look at that. Just smooth. You notice I wore the same shirt that I interviewed him with last night today, so it would look nice and smooth, the transition there. But John's a brilliant guy. Great comments coming in there during the interview from the chat. And I want to read a couple of them. I tried to poke a couple of them up there on the screen now that I know how to do that, and I have that available. But it's very cool. And let me see what some of the folks are saying. And there are a lot of these things, again, this is the nature of the chat, nature of the beast when you're dealing with the chat. Some are still talking about previous conversations as well. So let me bebop through these a little bit here and see a couple of people still talking about the JD Vance versus Marco Rubio hypothetical situation, and whether or not there's a lot of Ohio bias in choosing JD. Early on, by the way, when I was talking about that, it was JD, and most of the people were like, Ohio. It's nice to have the president come from your state. But in the last portion of that, prior to my interview with John, a lot of these comments came in and were all Rubio, and a few people saying, do not discount Ron DeSantis. Well, those are all really good questions, or really good comments. Roz said all three of them are young enough to keep us MAGA for 20 years, or mega MAGA maybe, for 20 years. Yeah, and longer. I mean, yeah, JD's what is he? Is he 40, 45 or something like that? Ron DeSantis is barely 50, I think, maybe. Marco Rubio as well. Yeah, they're all very young. It's the next generation of star conservatives. No doubt about it. Okay, what else do we have here? Okay, more on that. JD named his son Vivek after his fellow Ohioan and Yale best friend, Vivek Ramaswamy. That's interesting. Let's see. Here we go, into the story that John and I just were discussing, or stories, plural. Lois Irene says, incredible how leftists and the mainstream media deny the stats and the trans killers. And Terry says, yeah, it doesn't fit the agenda. And that's exactly right. That's what I was talking about with John Lott. The agenda is, is political. They don't care about facts. They don't care about, giving information or disseminating information as much as they care about the politics and how this impacts their agenda. There's no question about it. Let's see where else. Sorry, Terry says, LOL, men should not be taking female hormones. That is exactly right. Charlie says, is it the estrogen that drives a person crazy? No, I think you just called an entire half of our population crazy because they have estrogen, for crying out loud. Let's see. Jimbo, the trannies are all on unique pharmaceutical drugs. I'm not blaming the drugs, but questioning the pattern of violence surrounding trannies. They are disturbed. That's a very loose way of saying kind of what I said to John. There's I don't know what I want to call it, a straight up mental illness, a psychological delusion, a psychological condition can be temporary. I think mental illness is something that is probably there forever. I don't know if mental illness can be cured. It can be treated with SSRIs, the psycho drugs that are quite frankly very, very dangerous for a lot of people. But that's why I'm not calling it mental illness. I was talking about calling it psychological conditions or disorders and so forth. Some of those things can be treated, which is obviously very important here. But the fact that so many of them, 12, is somebody, do I have that put? I don't know if I put that up there. Somebody, hold on a second here. Somebody put about the 12 times, about what a massive number that is. I tried to emphasize that in my interview with John as well, but 12 times more likely. Not if somebody said you are twice as likely to do something than normal people are, you've got a problem. You're twice. That's 2 times as likely. 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. I mean, it's a percentage you can't wrap your brain around because it's not percent. It's not 12% more likely, which is slightly. It's 12 times. It's 100%, and then another, and on down the line. It's crazy. But if that many people are shooting people because of their, or not because of their, and the fact that they have this psychological condition, it kind of, means that I think the government and schools should be paying a little bit more attention when children start saying they want to dress up as the other sex. Notice I say the other sex or the opposite sex, not a different sex, because there are still only 2. And that's what binary means. So, but yeah, they're going to have to start watching as kids start to try to, display these sorts of tendencies, because obviously it's a very, very dangerous scenario with respect to, will they grow up to be, and as time goes on and they're taking cross-sex hormones and they're denying their body's biology, et cetera, et cetera. Is there something that we need to worry about that they may become violent? And yeah, I think it is entirely possible. Let me get a couple more of these comments up here. Oh, there it is. It was Lois Irene. 12 times is a huge number statistically. In any study, this would be published in many journals and on mainstream media. The probability of this would be whatever that says, probability less than 0.0000, what is that, to the 10,000th percentile? So yeah, that's very well said, Lois Irene. Just thinking, regarding crime statistics similar to other protected classes like Islam, the LGBTQ does not get identified by corrupted media. No more truth-seeking. Jan is exactly right. Lois Irene again, MSM, they're totalitarian. While, by the way, condemning and calling Donald Trump, people like Donald Trump, totalitarian. Terry Wags, I posted this one during the interview. Doctors at one time refused to sterilize a woman under 25 because she could change her mind. All the more reason, exactly right, why no one should be, quote unquote, affirming the idea of young children, even in their teenage years, that this is who they are and what they want to be. When your child says that they're born in the wrong body, you have to believe them. No, you have to be on crack to believe them. You need to get them away from whatever influencers are trying to teach them this, including maybe some of their friends who are going through it and then saying, hey, join me, let's become boys together or girls together or whatever. Because that's what's happening. So much of it is peer pressure influenced. Let's see. What else do we have? Oh yeah, I posted this one too, or I didn't post it, but I shared it already before. Weed being legal hasn't made any of those states any better, made folks mentally weak and lazy. My brother is in Colorado, says you can't employ anyone under 30 without them stinking the place up. He's no straight, but do you mean no saint? But WTF. Yeah, the stench of it too, because today's weed is not your weed from college in the 80s or in the 70s or in the 60s or whatever. It's so much more potent. The THC levels are so much higher. It all smells like what used to be identifiable. And I was an RA, so kill me for being nerdy. But I passed many a door on my floor of my dorm where I was an RA, where I could smell the unmistakable stench of not just weed, but when somebody had what kind of became known as skunk weed. It had a very distinct smell. That's what all marijuana smells like now. And you can't get away from it because it has been legalized recreationally. I mean, walk through a crowded open air. I mean, it can be an open air venue. You go to Crocker Park and shop outside. You'll be walking down the sidewalks, in the Crocker Park, outside mall, and you will just smell it every 100 feet. Just a big waft of that stench. It is terrible. So I get it, Jimbo. You're exactly right. PIM says, yes, also car insurance in Colorado costs about 3 times as much as it does here for the increased risk of DUI. That's what I was talking to John about, because, it's a lot easier to get away with. It's a lot easier to get away with because, obviously, weed stays in your system for up to 30 days. So if you're driving and you're driving recklessly and you might be high, and you'll test positive for having weed. Yeah, but it's because I had it a week ago. Last time I smoked was 4 days ago. I'm not high now. And it just gives them more, emboldens them more to go ahead and drive while stoned. Fred Frog says, I can smell weed all the time driving in traffic. That's pretty gross too. A couple more. Ron DeSantis has a long way to go to be competitive nationwide. Oh, that's Shannon. And yeah, he does. And that's a shame, actually. That's a shame because he's a phenomenal, phenomenal leader. I would love for our country to be run the way he runs the state of Florida. I would love that. But yeah, Marco Rubio's got a much higher national profile now, and so does JD Vance, as obviously being part of the administration. And Ron DeSantis would have a very, very tough road to hoe there. I agree with that. Let's see, a couple more real quick. Number one, Rhino, a bit concerned with JD's association with Tucker, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. Tucker's out there. He should be on an island, and he's not. He's still mainstream platformed by too many conservatives. Media want to focus on emotions and lie when stats are required, Westsider says. I don't understand why people don't like DeSantis. I worked with someone who lived down there, and they said she couldn't stand him. Wow, all the good he's done for that state, and she doesn't like him. Sometimes there's no accounting for people's political leanings. You just can't figure it out. Let's see. B. Butts says I find the smell offensive, and I knew somebody was going to make fun of me for being an RA, and it was the politically incorrect mechanic. It was the highest paying job on campus. All right. It was the highest paying job you could have on campus. I needed it. Get out the car at the Cleveland Zoo. And what's that smell? Not animals, weed. I hate when society forces me to explain crap to my kids because of other weak folks not being dignified. And Sharon is asking about JD's endorsement of Jay Edwards for treasurer instead of Christina Rogner. There is a fight there among a lot of conservatives in Northeast Ohio. I can tell you that. Conservative Republicans. That's a fight over the endorsement that JD gave. And Bernie Moreno gave Jay Edwards as well. And Bernie Moreno has asked me if I would interview Jay on the show and introduce him to, the voters. And I will. And I'll have Christina Rogner on as well. But yeah, the Blue 22 is a big time problem for me. Somebody who was a part of that is going to have to prove a lot of things to me before they'll get, any kind of support from me. But I will be fair in my questions and my conversations with people like Jay Edwards, whom I will indeed have on this show. But yeah, some of the endorsements there are real head scratchers, I think, for a lot of people. All right, when you hear the vibe,
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
That's not the vibe. This is By the way, that's one of my favorite lines. It was from Apollo 13. Ed Harris, super underrated actor. Remember this line?
Respect, sir. I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, actually. But yeah, let's go ahead and call this one a wrap. Thank you, chatters. Very, very busy. Now, like I said before, if you're not watching live on the live stream, and most people don't, they're catching it later on whenever they want to just download it or pop it on rumble.com. I also need to, never mind. I'm just thinking out loud here about YouTube and Facebook and so forth, whether or not I should continue to put the show there. I want to bring everybody together to the hub, which is Rumble, but I'm trying to reach out to more people as well in different places that are not on Rumble. So it's a conundrum I've got to figure out. But at any rate, if you're watching this later on Rumble or on Facebook or on YouTube, get in the comment section. The live chat's over when the show ends, the live stream ends, but get in the chat section and let me know, or I'm sorry, the comment section, and let me know what you think. The Rubio versus Vance conversation, the weed and the tranny conversation we just had with John R. Lott. I'd very much like to get your points. We're going to start reading more of those comments that are posted on shows live on upcoming episodes, including, by the way, some of the hate. There's a lot of hate. I get a lot of hate mail. I get a lot of messages and comments from people that just absolutely cannot stand the position I take on certain things or whatever it is. So we're going to probably start a new segment on every show called Hate Mail. And I'm going to read some of the worst comments to me, and I'll respond to them honestly and thoroughly. So that'll be coming up too. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Thanks to John R. Lott for putting in the time, obviously, as well. Don't forget, do not leave this screen without hitting the thumbs up button, without hitting the subscribe button, and without hitting the follow button, without hitting the join button. The join button will take you to Locals. That is the Locals community for Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. You can join for free, be a part of our ecosystem there. You can also be a paid supporter of the show and of the mission, and then you'll be able to get into some of the specific personal events that we host online and in person, and a few special interviews that are coming up only for the insiders as well. So become an insider. We'd love to have you be a part of that. All right, everybody. Thank you. Be well, be safe, and as always, stay free. See you tomorrow.